I didn't come to that bar looking for anyone. I came because the hotel room felt too quiet, like it could hear me unraveling. The day had chewed me up. Missed meetings, a fight with my manager. The kind of cold rain that soaks your socks before you even notice. I was done pretending. I just wanted to feel like a person again. Not someone clenching her jaw through polite smiles. So I found a corner of the bar, ordered a glass of Merlot, and let myself slouch for the first time in days. The low jazz, the golden glow of the backlit shelves, the quiet murmur of strangers. It all blurred into something warm, something almost safe. That's when I felt it. Not a word. Just a shift in the air beside me. Like a new gravity had entered the room. He sat down one stool away. No flashy entrance, no drink order barked over my shoulder, just presence. Calm. Intentional. He didn't look at me right away, but when he did, it was like he'd already been watching. "You look like someone who's had a day," he said, smooth, low, the kind of voice that didn't need to try. I laughed, soft and tired. "That obvious?" He didn't smile. Just tilted his glass, whiskey neat, and said, "Only to someone who knows what that kind of day feels like." That line shouldn't have worked on me. But it did. Because something in his tone wasn't flirtation. It was understanding. Familiarity. Like he'd seen the same boardrooms, worn the same exhaustion. We talked about nothing and everything. Travel disasters. Office politics. How hotel rooms never really feel like they belong to you. And the more we talked, the more I forgot to guard myself. I told him things I usually edit out. That sometimes I fantasize about missing my return flight. That success doesn't feel like success anymore. That I'm tired of being the strong one. He didn't interrupt. Didn't give advice. He just listened. And then just once, his knee brushed mine. I should have moved. But I didn't. Because in that moment, the world narrowed to heat and breath, and the quiet electricity of being truly seen. And maybe it was the wine. Or maybe it was the way his eyes didn't look away. But I suddenly knew, with the kind of certainty that bypasses logic, that I wasn't going back to my room alone. Not tonight. It's strange how quickly you can forget the noise of the world when someone looks at you like that. We weren't even touching anymore. Just two strangers on bar stools, our drinks halfway done, our words running out. But the silence between us wasn't awkward, it was full. Charged. He asked for my name. I hesitated. And then I gave him my real one. That should have scared me more than it did. He told me his. Or at least something that passed for one. And I accepted it, like we were both agreeing to a beautiful lie we didn't need to question. "I don't usually do this," I whispered, without knowing what this meant. "I know," he said. And the way he said it made me feel like he did. Like he'd read the tire behind my lipstick, the loneliness under my practiced laugh. The bartender glanced at us once, then seemed to disappear. Everyone else in the room faded into background noise. It was just me, and this man with two knowing eyes, and a heat that curled around my spine like smoke. He stood first. Didn't reach for my hand. Didn't ask. Just looked at me with the quiet confidence of someone who knew the answer before he posed the question. And I followed. The elevator ride was barely a minute, but it felt longer. Tighter. I could feel him beside me. Not touching. But close enough that every breath felt borrowed. My hands were trembling just slightly. Not from fear, from need. A deep, aching kind that had nothing to do with the body and everything to do with being wanted. When the doors opened, neither of us spoke. The hallway stretched ahead like something sacred. And then we were inside his room. The lights stayed low. His coat hit the chair. My heels hit the floor. And he turned to me. Like he'd been waiting all night just for this breath, this pause, this moment. I should have said something. But the truth is, I didn't want to speak. I wanted to feel what it was like to forget everything with him. The first time he touched me, it wasn't where I expected. Not my waist. Not my wrist. It was my hair. He reached up. Slowly, like asking permission without words, and tucked it behind my ear. His fingers grazed my cheek. Just barely. But the heat of it lit a trail all the way down my spine. I didn't breathe. Not really. I just stood there watching him. His eyes weren't on my body. They were on my face. My expression. Like he wanted to see the exact second I gave in. I didn't say yes. But I didn't pull away either. And that's when he stepped closer. Barely enough to touch. but close enough that I felt the whisper of his breath against my collarbone. "Tell me to stop," he said, soft, low like velvet sliding across my skin. I didn't. Because I couldn't. My body had already made the decision. My mind was just catching up. His hand moved to my back. Not forceful, not rushed, just enough to steady me as I leaned in. My lips hovered near his for a suspended heartbeat. That pause was everything. It was where the fear lived. The thrill. The what if. And then his mouth brushed mine. Not a kiss, not yet, just a ghost of one. Promise. I swear my knees almost gave out. When we finally kissed, it wasn't hungry. It was deliberate. Like we had all the time in the world. Like this wasn't about taking. It was about unraveling. Piece by piece. Every inch he touched felt like it had never been touched before. Not like this. Not with such quiet reverence. Like he was memorizing me for a reason I didn't understand yet. My hands found his chest, then his neck, then his face. Tracing the edges like I was trying to convince myself he was real. And he was. Every breath, every slow movement, every hesitation, he was real. And for that moment so was I. I stopped thinking about what came next. And let myself fall into the heat of now. We moved through the night like it wasn't real. Like time had stepped outside and left us alone in that room, suspended. At one point I laughed. Too suddenly, too loudly, and covered my mouth in embarrassment. He just looked at me like it was the best sound he'd ever heard. "You don't laugh enough," he said, brushing his thumb along my cheekbone. Maybe I forgot how. He didn't answer. Just pulled me closer. Wrapped his arms around me in a way that didn't feel like seduction anymore. Felt like something deeper. Something I didn't know how to name. There was a moment, and I'll never forget it, where I was lying on his chest, and the only sound was his heartbeat. Slow. Steady. And I realized how long it had been since I'd let myself just rest on someone. Not perform. Not prove. Just be held. I didn't even care that he was a stranger. Maybe that's why it felt safe. He didn't know my reputation. My mistakes. The version of me I try so hard to curate. He just knew this version. The tired one. The quiet one. The one who needed this more than she would ever admit out loud. And he never asked for more. No stories. No expectations. Just presence. Just skin and breath and warmth. The world outside that room didn't exist. There was no job. No pressure. No itinerary. There was just the way his fingers traced lazy lines along my arm, like they had nowhere else to be. And the way my body leaned into his like it had finally stopped fighting itself. We stayed that way for what felt like hours, tangled, wordless, drifting in and out of sleep. I don't remember the moment I let go. Only that when I did, it felt like freedom. And maybe something close to peace. I woke to light. Soft, pale hotel room light filtering through thin curtains, the kind that never fully blocks out the world. The bed beside me was empty. First, I didn't panic. I just rolled onto my back, stretched slowly, the sheets still warm from where he'd been. My body felt weightless, wrecked in the most beautiful way. As if someone had peeled away the stress layer by layer until all that remained was skin, breath, and memory. I expected to hear the shower running. Maybe him moving around the room, quietly, respectfully, still careful not to break whatever spell we'd slipped into. But the room was still. Too still. And that's when I saw it. My dress, the one I'd peeled off in nervous laughter just hours ago, was neatly folded on the chair. Not thrown. Not wrinkled. Arranged. Like someone had touched it gently. And beside it was the note. A single folded piece of hotel stationery, resting just where my hand would find it. At first I smiled. I thought maybe it was sweet. A message. A memory. A way of saying last night meant something. But the second I touched it, I knew. The paper was cold. Crisp. Deliberate. My name was written across the front. And inside, in tight, sharp handwriting, were just a few lines. You shouldn't trust strangers, no matter how they make you feel. We all have our reasons. No signature. No goodbye. Just that. I read it twice. Then again. And my stomach dropped. The bed was still warm. But everything else suddenly felt cold. I sat there for a long time staring at that note. Trying to make sense of it. Trying to rewind the night in my mind and find the crack. The moment I missed something. But there was nothing. No red flag. No strange behavior. Nothing that screamed danger. Just a man who listened too well. touched too gently, spoke like he understood parts of me I hadn't even said out loud. That was the part that scared me most. Because somewhere between the laughter and the silence, I'd let him in. And now I didn't even know if he was real. I checked the closet. Empty. The bathroom. Nothing. Not a trace of him. His name, if that's what it was, meant nothing when I whispered it aloud. I picked up my phone, hesitating over the idea of calling the front desk. But what would I even say? I spent the night with someone and now I don't know who he was? They'd ask for details I didn't have. A last name. A room number. Anything that could prove he'd actually been there. And I couldn't give them any of it. Because I never asked. Because I didn't want to know. That was the unspoken deal. A night without consequences. But now the consequences were all I could think about. His words echoed in my mind like static. You shouldn't trust strangers. We all have our reasons. Was it a warning? A threat? Or something else entirely? The part of me that wanted to believe in the connection, that fragile, aching, beautiful connection, whispered that maybe he was protecting me. That maybe it was goodbye in a different language. But the woman in me who'd spent years building walls suddenly felt stupid. Because I let one night make me feel safe. And now? I didn't even feel like myself. I didn't check out right away. I couldn't. I sat on the edge of the bed, that note still in my hand, as the minutes crawled by and the day outside grew louder. Traffic, voices in the hallway, the distant sound of a vacuum down the corridor. But none of it reached me. I felt unmoored. Like the person who'd walked into that bar last night was still somewhere down there, sipping wine, waiting for something to change. And maybe it had. But not in the way I thought. I kept going back over everything he said. The way he listened when I spoke about my job, my loneliness, my secrets. Like he knew them already. Like he'd studied the blueprint of me before we met. It wasn't romantic anymore. It was eerie. I told him I didn't usually do this. And I hadn't lied. But the way he responded, I know, felt different in hindsight. Like he was confirming something, not guessing. And that's when it hit me. Maybe I wasn't the one who had chosen him. Maybe he'd been waiting for me. The thought made my skin prickle. I grabbed my things with shaky hands, packed in silence, took one last look around the room, half expecting some trace of him to reappear. A forgotten cufflink, a receipt, anything that would make him feel real. But there was nothing. He'd erased himself completely, except for the heat in my chest that hadn't cooled, except for the note. I slipped it into my bag. I don't know why. Maybe proof. Maybe punishment. And as I walked out of the room, down the hallway, through the lobby, I kept expecting someone to stop me, to ask where he was, to tell me this was part of something bigger. But no one did. To the world, I was just another woman leaving a hotel. But inside, I felt like something in me had been taken. Or left behind. And I still didn't know which. Back at the airport, everything felt too bright. Too loud. People brushed past me with coffees and carry-ons, talking into phones, checking gates. Living lives that felt intact. Mine didn't. I stared at the departures board, eyes unfocused, heartbeat dull. I was going home, or at least back to the place I lived. But something in me had shifted. I felt hollow, like I'd left parts of myself in that room without knowing I was giving them away. I kept replaying the way he touched me, the stillness in his eyes, the warmth in his voice, all of it real. And yet it wasn't, because he'd vanished without a trace. And in his place he'd left a warning. Not about him. About me. You shouldn't trust strangers, no matter how they make you feel. That line wasn't a threat. Not really. It was the truth. He didn't hurt me. He didn't take anything, not in the physical sense. But I let him into places that no one had touched in years. I gave him access to a version of myself I barely showed anyone. And he walked away like it was nothing. Maybe that was the most dangerous part of all. Not what he did, but what I let him mean to me after just one night. Now I carry that memory like a splinter under the skin. Not bleeding, but never quite healing either. And sometimes late at night I still wonder if I ever really knew what that night was. Or if I was just someone's story written and folded and left behind. Some people leave marks without ever leaving fingerprints. He left me with nothing I could prove, and everything I couldn't forget.